What if one day you woke up, and every trace of greed, every flicker of anger, every cloud of delusion was simply gone? Not managed, not suppressed, not under control for a while. Completely gone. Imagine stepping out of bed with a mind utterly free, no craving gnawing at you. No resentment poisoning your thoughts. No confusion distorting your view of reality. What would that life even look like? Could you still recognize yourself? It's a shocking question, isn't it? Because for most of us, these forces, desire, hatred, confusion, are so deeply woven into our daily lives that we barely notice them anymore. They are like background noise, the constant hum of wanting more. The subtle anger at people who don't behave the way we expect. The fog of distraction that keeps us running in circles. They shape our choices, our relationships, even the way we see ourselves. To imagine life without them almost feels impossible. And yet, 2.500 years ago, the Buddha declared with startling clarity that this is not only possible, it is the highest potential of every human being. In the Nibbāna Sutta, one of the oldest records in the Buddhist canon, the Buddha defined enlightenment, Nibbāna, in just a few words: the destruction of greed, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This is called the element of Nibbāna. Pause for a moment on that word, destruction. It's not about keeping anger under control. It's not about taking a deep breath when you feel jealous. It's not about learning to manage stress with clever techniques. Those things might help for a little while, but the roots are still there. And if the roots are alive, the weeds will always grow back. The Buddha was talking about something far more radical, pulling those roots out once and for all. Destroying them so they can never sprout again. That is enlightenment, not the polishing of the self, not the temporary calming of emotions, but the complete uprooting of the poisons that cause suffering. Now think about what that means for you. Right here, right now. Imagine never again feeling the restless hunger of desire that leaves you unsatisfied no matter what you achieve. Imagine never again being consumed by hatred, whether it's a burning rage or a quiet bitterness that eats at you from within. Imagine never again stumbling through life with the confusion that blinds you to what's real. What would it be like to live without those chains? To give you a picture, let's use a simple metaphor. Imagine you've been carrying a heavy backpack since childhood. At first, you notice the weight, it's exhausting. But after years, you grow used to it. You assume this is just how life feels: heavy, tiring, limited. You even start to believe that the backpack is part of who you are. Then one day, someone shows you, you can put it down. And the moment you do, you feel weightless, alive in a way you never imagined. That is what awakening feels like. This isn't about escaping the world or becoming some detached mystic. The Buddha himself lived fully in the world after his awakening, teaching, traveling, engaging with people for 45 years. Enlightenment doesn't pull you away from life, it transforms the way you live it. It's about freedom right here, in the middle of everyday existence. And here's the most profound part: this isn't just for saints or sages. The Buddha wasn't some divine exception. He was a human being who uncovered what all human beings are capable of. Which means you, too, carry this potential. The possibility of complete freedom is not outside of you, it's within you, waiting to be discovered. So, if you've ever felt that no matter how much you chase, you're never fully satisfied, if you've ever wondered why anger still controls you even when you try to let it go, if you've ever sensed that the story of me you've been protecting is more fragile than it seems, this journey is for you. Because awakening is not about becoming something new. It's about seeing clearly what you already are, and putting down the weight you were never meant to carry. And once you taste that freedom, even for a moment, you realize, this is what it means to be fully, fearlessly alive. 1. Defining enlightenment, the radical freedom the Buddha taught. When the Buddha spoke about awakening, he didn't dress it up with mystical poetry or vague promises of eternal bliss. He cut straight to the bone. In the Nibbāna Sutta, he defined Nibbāna with a single, devastatingly clear sentence: the destruction of greed, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This is called the element of Nibbāna. Pause on that word, destruction. Not control, not management, not just breathe through it. Total eradication. Imagine pulling weeds from a garden. You don't just trim the leaves so it looks neat. You rip out the roots so the weeds can never grow back. That's enlightenment. Now, let's be real. Greed, hatred, and delusion don't sound like exotic enemies from some ancient text. They're the very things that run our modern world. Greed drives endless consumerism, new phones, bigger houses, more likes, more followers. Hatred plays out in our politics, our comment sections, even in the quiet bitterness we carry against people who hurt us years ago. And delusion? That's the big one, the illusion that we are a solid, permanent self that has to be defended, polished, and upgraded non-stop. The Buddha wasn't offering better stress management tips. He was pointing to the possibility of living without these poisons altogether. Think about carrying a heavy backpack from childhood. You get so used to the weight that it feels normal. You even forget it's there. Then one day, you set it down. Suddenly your body feels weightless, free in a way you never imagined. That moment, that shock of relief, is what the Buddha meant by destruction. This is not nihilism, not nothing matters. It's the opposite. It is radical freedom. When greed, hatred, and delusion are gone, the mind isn't empty, it's fertile. Compassion, clarity, and boundless energy spring up naturally. Because the soil is finally clean. Awakening is not about escaping life. It's about discovering how light, fearless, and fully alive life can be when nothing toxic chains you down. That's why enlightenment isn't just another spiritual milestone, it is the greatest human potential. 2. The mechanism of awakening, seeing through the 5 aggregates. If awakening is the end of greed, hatred, and delusion, how does it actually happen? The Buddha gave us the roadmap in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, where he pointed to something deceptively simple. Look closely at the 5 aggregates. What are these? They're not mystical. They're literally the building blocks of your everyday life. Form, your body and sensations. That tightness in your chest when you're stressed. The warmth of a coffee mug in your hand. The ache in your back after sitting too long. They show up, shift, and fade, never stable. Feeling. Every moment lands as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Someone likes your post, you feel good. Someone ignores you, you feel uneasy. But none of those feelings stay. Perception. The way you label and recognize things. You see red lights and think, stop. You hear a laugh and remember your friend. But perceptions glitch all the time, mishear a word, misremember a story, and you realize how shaky this aggregate really is. Mental formations, thoughts, emotions, habits, intentions. One moment you're angry, 10 minutes later you feel sympathy. Thoughts rise like bubbles in soda and pop just as quickly. Consciousness. That basic awareness that knows all of this. But even that isn't fixed. It changes depending on what you're aware of. And it disappears when you're in deep sleep. The Buddha's point? All of this, body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, even awareness itself, is unstable, impermanent. They can't give you lasting satisfaction. And none of them can be nailed down as a permanent, me. Here's the practice. Watch them. Seriously watch them. Notice how a thought shows up out of nowhere, hangs around for a bit, and then vanishes. Notice how a feeling that seemed overwhelming an hour ago now feels like nothing. Notice how every part of your experience is in motion. And here's the insight. If everything that makes up you is shifting, then what exactly is this solid I you're clinging to? You can't find it. It's not there. When this stops being an intellectual idea and becomes something you see in real time, something in you changes forever. The grip of greed, hatred, and delusion weakens, not because you're fighting them, but because the illusion they depend on collapses. That's the engine of awakening. It's not about suppressing who you are. It's about realizing there was never a fixed self to defend in the first place. 3. The signs of awakening. What freedom really looks like. So how do you know when awakening is real? The early texts describe it with one sharp word. Asavakkhaya, the complete destruction of the mental defilements. Greed, hatred, delusion, the poisons at the core of human suffering, aren't managed anymore. They're gone. The Buddha also laid out 10 fetters. The chains that keep consciousness tied to suffering. Don't think of them as abstract doctrines. Think of them as the invisible ropes you trip over every single day. 1. Belief in a permanent self. That tight grip on me and mine. 2. Doubt. Constant second-guessing the path. Never committing. 3. Attachment to rituals, believing the form itself saves you, while missing the substance. 4. Sensual craving, the endless hunger for pleasure. 5. Ill will, that quiet resentment or outright rage. 6. Craving for fine states, wanting to get lost in spiritual highs. 7. Craving for formless states, chasing even subtler escapes. 8. Conceit, measuring yourself against others, better, worse, equal. 9. Restlessness, the mind that can't sit still. 10. Ignorance, the root blindness that keeps it all spinning. Awakening means these chains snap, not overnight, but step by step, like breaking links in a chain until the whole thing falls apart. Now, the texts also mention the 3 true knowledges: remembering past lives, seeing the rebirth of beings according to karma, and knowing directly that the defilements are destroyed. Fascinating, yes, but the Buddha warned us not to chase these. They're side effects, not the goal. Don't confuse fireworks for daylight. Because the real sign of awakening isn't exotic powers, it's freedom. Think of it like this: you've been carrying a heavy backpack your whole life. At first you didn't even notice the weight because you were born with it. Over time, you just assumed this was normal. And then, one day, you set it down. You don't just feel lighter, you realize you were never meant to carry it in the first place. That's what awakening feels like. The relief isn't in some new superpower. It's in the absence of the burden you thought was you. And here's the beauty: when the backpack is gone, you discover you can move, love, and live in ways you never thought possible. That lightness, that fearless clarity, that's the true mark of awakening. 4. Modern connection, self-transcendence and Maslow. When the Buddha spoke of awakening, it sounded radical in his time. But what's fascinating is that even modern psychology eventually circled back to the same insight. You've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that famous pyramid we all saw in school. At the base, food, water, safety, then belonging, then esteem. At the very top, self-actualization, becoming the best version of yourself. For decades, people thought that was the ultimate human potential. But near the end of his life, Maslow had a revelation. He realized self-actualization wasn't the peak. He proposed something higher, self-transcendence. He noticed that the most fulfilled human beings weren't the ones polishing their egos, but the ones who went beyond ego altogether. They experienced life as deeply interconnected, dissolving the sharp line between me and you. Maslow described them as transcenders, people who found joy, freedom, and meaning by moving beyond the separate self. Sound familiar? That's exactly what the Buddha had pointed to 2.500 years earlier. Awakening isn't about building a stronger self, it's about seeing through the illusion of a fixed self altogether. Now, why does this matter to you and me today? Because most of us live in a world obsessed with self-actualization. Get fitter, get richer, build your brand, perfect your identity. Social media makes this worse. Curate the perfect life. Polish the me we want others to see. And yet, underneath all that effort, there's still a restlessness, a quiet fear. What if it all falls apart? What if I lose what I've built? The Buddha's teaching cuts through that anxiety like a blade. When you see that there never was a solid self to protect, the whole exhausting project collapses. What's left is a freedom so complete it can feel shocking. Suddenly, you're not carrying the weight of constant self-construction. You're not anxiously guarding your ego's little castle. Instead, you're open, alive to the moment, free to love, to give, to act without fear. Think about it like a river. We give it a name, the Mississippi, the Ganges, and pretend it's one thing. But it's never the same river twice. Water flows in, flows out, yet we cling to the label as if it were fixed. That's what we do with ourselves. Awakening is realizing, you're the flow, not the label. And when that sinks in, the burden of clinging drops away. This is the highest human potential. Not becoming the perfect me, but stepping beyond me altogether. And here's the magic. When you let go of the illusion of self, life doesn't become empty, it becomes full. Full of compassion, clarity, joy, and the ability to meet each moment without fear. That's not just philosophy. That's the doorway into the most extraordinary way of being human. 5. No self and emptiness. The river that is never the same. One of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism is anatta, or no self. People often hear it and think Buddhism is saying, you don't exist. That's not it at all. The Buddha wasn't denying your experience, of course you are here. Breathing, thinking, feeling. What he was pointing to is more subtle. There is no fixed, permanent essence inside you that you can call the real me. Think of a river. We give it a name, the Mississippi, the Ganges, and treat it as if it's one unchanging thing. But look closer. The water is never the same. Always flowing, always changing. The river is not a static entity. It's a process. And yet, because we name it, we believe in its permanence. That's exactly what happens with ourselves. We say, this is me, this is who I am. As if the body, thoughts, and feelings were frozen in time. But they're flowing, moment by moment, just like the river. In the Pali texts, the Buddha described this insight as seeing the world empty of self, or of anything belonging to self. Later Mahayana traditions expanded this into the emptiness of all phenomena, not just persons. But every single thing is empty of fixed, independent existence. Now, this might sound abstract, even a little unsettling, but its practical meaning is profound. If nothing is fixed, then nothing is permanent, which also means, no suffering is permanent. That grief you think you'll never escape, that anxiety that feels endless, that failure you think defines you forever, none of them can last. They can't, because their very nature is change. This flips everything. Instead of being trapped by your circumstances, you realize they're fluid. Instead of being bound to a solid self that must always be defended, you see that self is just a label on a flowing process. And the moment you see that clearly, the tight grip of clinging begins to loosen. No self and emptiness aren't nihilism. They're liberation, because if the I you've been protecting doesn't exist as a fixed thing, then you are free. Free to change, free to grow, free to love without fear of losing yourself, free to suffer less, because no suffering can claim you as its permanent home. That's why the Buddha called this insight not just philosophy, but a doorway. It opens into a life where you are no longer trapped in the story of me, but alive in the reality of constant flow. And in that flow, there is room for boundless compassion, clarity, and peace. 6. The path to awakening. Walking the Noble Eightfold Path. If awakening is the destination, the Buddha didn't leave us wandering in the dark. He laid out a map, clear, practical, step by step. That map is the Noble Eightfold Path. It's not a random list of rules. It's a training program for the mind, heart, and life itself. The path has 3 pillars. Wisdom, Panya. It starts with right view, understanding the 4 noble truths. Impermanence, suffering, and no self. From that flows right intention, a mind inclined toward letting go, toward kindness, toward clarity instead of delusion. Ethics, Sila. This is the foundation. Right speech means using words that heal, not harm. Right action is living in ways that don't cause suffering to yourself or others. Right livelihood is earning a living without exploitation or cruelty. These aren't just moral rules, they create a clean environment where the mind can actually settle. Meditation, Samadhi. Here comes the engine of transformation. Right effort, cultivating wholesome states and abandoning unwholesome ones. Right mindfulness, being fully aware of body, feelings, mind, and reality without judgment. Right concentration, developing a mind stable, luminous, and collected, capable of deep insight. Now, here's the key. The Buddha emphasized 2 wings of meditation, calm, samatha, and insight, vipassana. Calm is like stilling a lake so the mud settles and the water becomes clear. Insight is then looking into that water and seeing its depths. You need both. Calm gives stability, insight gives freedom. And this doesn't have to be mystical. Start with something simple. Observe your breath. Notice its rhythm, its rise and fall. When thoughts rush in, don't fight them, just recognize thinking, and return to the breath. That's calm. Then, when a feeling of irritation shows up, instead of saying, I'm angry, notice. A wave of anger is arising, now it's fading. That's insight. Every time you do this, you loosen the grip of clinging. You discover, this body isn't me. This thought isn't me. This emotion isn't me. They're processes, flowing in and out. And with that realization, suffering loses its anchor. The Noble Eightfold Path isn't a ladder you climb once. It's more like 8 spokes of a wheel, each one reinforcing the others. Keeping the wheel of practice turning. Day by day, step by step, this path reshapes the mind from the inside out. This is how awakening is unlocked, not through shortcuts, but through steady training. It's the discipline that turns lofty philosophy into lived freedom. 7. The awakened life, compassion without clinging. What happens after awakening? A lot of people imagine an enlightened person disappearing into caves or mountaintops, far removed from ordinary life. But the Buddha himself proved otherwise. After his awakening, he spent 45 years walking among people, teaching, guiding, and living in the world. That's the clue. Enlightenment isn't an escape from life. It's a new way of living in life, fully engaged, but completely free. When the illusion of a fixed self dissolves, the walls between me and you begin to soften. Out of that openness flows what the Buddha called the 4 immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. These aren't forced attitudes you have to manufacture. They pour out naturally when the poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion are gone. Think about it. If you no longer carry the constant burden of protecting me, how much easier is it to care about others? If you aren't locked in cycles of fear, craving, or resentment, love doesn't cost you anything, it becomes your default. Compassion isn't an effort anymore, it's the spontaneous fragrance of a free mind. And this doesn't make you passive. An awakened person isn't detached in a cold, indifferent way. They respond with greater clarity and power, because they see things as they are. No clinging to success, no fear of failure, just precise, compassionate action in each moment. We've seen glimpses of this in modern figures. The Dalai Lama carries the suffering of his people yet radiates humor and warmth. Thich Nhat Hanh, through mindfulness and peace work, turned the horrors of war into a movement for healing worldwide. Their lives show us that awakening isn't about retreating from society, but about transforming it, bringing wisdom and compassion into conversations about peace, justice, even the environment. Imagine living like that, not weighed down by your own story, not constantly measuring yourself against others, not paralyzed by fear or desire. Instead, alive, open, responsive, with a heart that embraces the world without clinging to it. That's the awakened life. And here's the most beautiful part: it's not reserved for a chosen few. The same potential exists in each of us. Every breath of mindfulness, every act of kindness, every moment of letting go is already a taste of that freedom. Awakening isn't just the end of suffering. It's the beginning of living with a love and clarity that knows no limit. Enlightenment is not some mystical prize reserved for a chosen few. It is not distant, unreachable, or locked away in ancient temples. It is the deepest human potential, available to each of us, right here, right now. Every mindful breath you take, every moment you choose compassion over anger, every time you let go instead of clinging, that is already a step into freedom. And remember this: awakening is not only the end of suffering for yourself. It is also the beginning of becoming a light for others. When you are free from the poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, your very presence becomes a source of clarity, kindness, and hope in a world that desperately needs it. This is the highest potential of the human heart. At this moment, as so many beings suffer from war, disaster, and despair, let us pause together. May the compassion of the Buddha embrace all who are in pain. May those trapped in fear find courage, those weighed down by grief find relief, and those consumed by hatred find peace. May the light of awakening shine on every corner of this troubled world. If this teaching has touched you, I invite you to join our journey here on Dharma Veins. Subscribe, share this video, and help spread wisdom and compassion where it's needed most. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What does enlightenment mean to you? Do you see it as a distant goal, or as something you can taste in small ways every day? Your reflections may become the very words that inspire someone else on their path. Together, we keep this light alive. Awakening is not only the end of suffering for you, it is the beginning of becoming a light for all. This is the highest potential of being human.